Now, if you haven't heard about Charlie Crist or our current governor and how they compare, you're going to hear now some great information. And if you were wondering whether you should vote for Charlie Crist over Governor Scott, I know that you're going to go away not having any doubt in your mind. We have a great program today. Steve Larson, who's from our club, has a program called Why Charlie Crist Must Be Elected Governor. So, Steve.
Good morning. Well, part of my thunder has already been stolen. Charlie Crist is a good guy. All right, let's get started. I hope this first slide is prophetic. I'm doing everything I can to make it so. But before I make this presentation, I want to go back to the presentations I made in 2013 and the plan we outlined then. In 2013, I said we were going to tell you everything that Rick Scott has done that we believe is harmful to the state of Florida. And then we wanted you to engage your friends and your neighbors and tell them about the dishonest practices that Rick Scott is so fond of and that we can do better. I told you that Rick Scott turned down the Rapid Rail, $2.4 billion worth of money, and the 23,000 good-paying jobs it would have produced. I told you that Rick Scott got rich by defrauding Medicare and bribing doctors to send their patients to his clinics. I also showed you this slide. This is the cost of corporate welfare and tax cuts for businesses. He cut $300 million from universities, $1 billion from state worker pensions. He cut prisons. He cut health care. He cut Social Security. He eliminated 4,400 jobs. And he cut state worker salaries by 3%. These are the costs that he imposed on the state of Florida so that he could benefit corporations and the people that own them. Now we jump ahead to 214. And that's what this program is about. When the Democrats nominate someone, and we have, we're going to provide you with facts about them so you can tell your friends that our candidate deserves their vote. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm going to ask you to do a few things between now and the election. So, moving on to the agenda for the presentation. It's pretty simple. What Charlie said, what Charlie did, what Charlie says he will do, and what we need you to do. See, I got this book. Now, I usually don't buy books written by politicians, but I wanted to find out more about what Charlie said about himself. But I have a quote that happens to be a favorite of mine because it is mine, and is I don't believe what people say, I believe what people do. So what I did is I went into the book, and I looked at what he said, and then I looked at what he did to back that up. And then, after that, I went to his platform. And that's the next part of the agenda. But first, let's get about Charlie Crist. Who is he? Charlie is named after his father. His full name is Charles Joseph Crist, Jr. Within days after he was born, his family moved to Atlanta, where his father went to Emory University's medical school. After he graduated, he took his internship in St. Petersburg, and the Crist family never left. When his father was established, he got enamored with the Head Start program, and he believed it was being improperly administered. So he ran for the Pinellas County School Board. And Charlie mentions in there at the events that he was the one campaigning for his father. And his father won the seat, and Charlie found out he liked politics. So then he ran for the 8th grade class president, and Charlie won. Charlie ran for senior class president, and he won. Now, he attended Wake Forest, but see, Charlie was also the high school's quarterback. Rice and Vanderbilt were looking at him for a possible scholarship, and in his senior year, one of the teams they were playing took his knee out, and that pretty much ended his career. But even then, with a knee that restricted his mobility, he went to Wake Forest, walked on, and got the job as the scrimmage quarterback, which he did for a year, and then realizing that he was never going to get the #1 spot, he transferred back to Florida State in Tallahassee, ran for student senate and won, and after that he went to Cumberland and earned a degree in law. Now, as I was getting into the book, I saw this quote, which to me is an extremely important quote. "I am grateful for what I learned at Cumberland, especially how to focus on complex issues and see the core principles buried in there." The core principles are the words I want you to focus on. Now, the context is, and this is what Charlie says, Cumberland is a second-rate law school. He graduated from there, and then he failed the Florida bar twice. Now, he said that in the book. That admission in his book about himself shows me humility, and I think humility is a pretty good thing to have in a governor. He knows what it's like to try and fail and try again. There just isn't any quit in Charlie Crist. Another quote. This is what he said: "Everyone deserves a second chance." In 2007, then Charlie Crist issued an executive order restoring the voting rights to nonviolent felons. During the 3 remaining years of his term, more than 150,000 people had their rights restored. Now, there was also a study in 2011 that says if you restore someone's civil rights, they are 1/3 less likely to go back to prison than the group that didn't. So it made sense from a financial standpoint. Now, it's important to note here that the Republican Party, he's the governor of the state of Florida, a Republican. The Republican Party wasn't in favor of this, so he went against party. You will see a trend here that Charlie Crist puts principles over party consistently. Now, in contrast, when Rick Scott took office in 2011, one of the first things he did was to rescind this. Under Rick Scott, once you're out of jail, nonviolent, you're off probation, you've paid all the fines, you have to wait 5 years before you can apply. And then the clemency board waits 7 years before they consider it, and if any infraction at all happens, you go back to the start, which means in Florida, if you're a felon, no matter what kind of a felon you are, you will never get your voting rights back under a governor like Rick Scott. What he said: "While I don't like abortion personally, I was equally opposed to government inserting itself into the personal medical decision. I thought it should be a woman's decision, period." Now, got to be fair here, and I'm trying to be as fair and honest as possible. Charlie hasn't been totally consistent on votes on the position of abortion, but if you're running for statewide office in Florida and you come out as strong pro-choice, you got very little chance of winning. But in 1998, he said the following, and I want to read this quote to you. "I think this is a very personal decision, and I think it is a decision that a woman should make and have the right to make after consulting with her family, her physician, her clergy, but not her government." Now, this is yet another position where Charlie Crist put the people above politics because the Republicans didn't like it. And in 1995, Crist vetoed the bill that would have required a 24-hour waiting period before a woman could obtain an abortion. Now, on education, he said, if we want good teachers, we should pay them decently when it comes to public education. Now, the context of this, Charlie ran for the position of Florida Education Commissioner in 2001, so he has experience, a lot of experience in education in Florida. Now, he served there for 2 years because a constitutional amendment was passed in '98 that gave the governor the right to make appointments. But for 2 years he served in that position. He's got 2 sisters that are public educators, and he says he will fight for public education, and he has. What he did. Charlie Crist vetoed Senate Bill 6, backed by Jeb Bush, that would have changed how Florida teachers are paid, evaluated and contracted and certified. Now, anybody that has been in a classroom knows that a bill that would have tied teacher pay to student test scores is just plain wrong. If you're a teacher, you understand luck of the draw. You can get assigned kids that are wonderful to teach and they will score high, and you can get assigned kids who have special needs, and try as they might, they won't. And we should not tie teachers' pay to the performance of the classroom. And my wife was a third-grade teacher. Now, the House Democratic leader at the time, Franklin Sands, said, "It is refreshing that our governor listened and responded to the voice of the majority of Floridians who oppose this radical bill." So he received praise, the Republican governor, from the Democratic speaker, and vetoed a Republican bill. Once again, principle over party. And I'm sure most of you remember Terry Shriver. This was, I watched this with great interest. Here's what he said. "I thought the whole thing was an abominable circus and a cruel embarrassment. The best evidence we had said Terry would never wish to live like this. I certainly understood it. Neither would I." Now, Charlie Crist was Florida's very first Republican Attorney General. What he said resonated with me. Jeb Bush issued an order on October 21st directing doctors to resume life support. The Republican legislator passed that in 1 day to give the governor the authority to overrule a court decision. Now, what did Charlie Crist, first Republican Attorney General of the state of Florida, do? He did nothing. "I just didn't participate. I made no statements. I filed no suits. I didn't go along." Well, let me tell you, sometimes doing nothing is doing something pretty big, because Jeb Bush is the governor, George Bush is the president, and Charlie Crist is the Attorney General of the state of Florida, and he did not engage. And that, there once more, principle over party. When Charlie Crist was elected, this is what he said. "Tonight we all come together as one, not as Republicans, Democrats, or Independents, but as one, as Floridians. Each Floridian will have a voice in all that we do, and I will serve every Floridian with all my heart. I meant what I said." Now that tells me that Charlie Crist isn't very partisan, and it reinforces everything I found out about him. It's a good quote. What he did. 3 weeks before his inauguration, Charlie canceled the governor's ball. After he took the oath, he changed into jeans and a sweater, opened the gates of the governor's mansion, and 4,000 people joined him in an impromptu party. Jeb Bush's ball cost $2 million. Rick Scott's cost over $3 million. And almost all of the money comes from private sector companies doing business with the state of Florida. Now, what he did, and this is what Charlie did in the first few weeks of his term. His first official act, he ordered the creation of the Florida Office of Open Government. Now, laws were on the books covering open government, but there was no enforcement. Charlie had been Attorney General. He established the Office of Open Government, and he took the best open government lawyer from that staff and put them in charge. What he did, before he completed his first month in office, he's talking in the first person, I called the legislature into special session to do something about the gouging insurance rates that private insurance companies were charging Florida homeowners. In October 3, 2007, Charlie Crist vowed again today to keep some 50 insurance companies who have requested rate increases from raising their rates on homeowners insurance. Now, those 50 companies, those 50 insurance companies, who do you think would have paid for Charlie Crist's inauguration ball? Part of them would. It's real tough to take their money and then 30 days later go after them in the press for raising their rates. Now contrast that to Rick Scott. He signed Senate Bill 408, which allows insurance companies, among other things, to limit sinkhole coverage. And that affects everybody, every one of us, because we have sinkholes here, and to allow the insurance companies to increase rates by 15%. Now, pretty clear. Charlie Crist, the Republican governor, was very concerned about the rates homeowners pay. Rick Scott, as the Republican governor, represented his people well. That's the insurance companies and the people that own their insurance companies, but not you and me. So Charlie Crist is a people over party. Rick Scott is a profits over people. And I want you to remember that. Then, on climate change, it is vitally important. I was convinced to do what I could to reduce climate change. Not exactly a Republican position. What he did, he signed 3 executive orders limiting greenhouse gas emissions and setting stricter limits for cars sold in Florida and insisting that utilities generate at least 20% of their electricity from renewable sources. Now, it's interesting that Marco Rubio, then Speaker of the House, attacked the actions and said, "We must be willing to embrace the free market approach, not European-styled big government mandates." And I can translate that for you. It means, let's do what the Koch brothers want us to do. I grew up in Kansas, but that doesn't mean I'm a fan of Koch Industries. Okay, what he said. Next slide. What I wanted was so basic, so unambiguously right, that our citizens be allowed to vote in a reasonably convenient manner, that the state should help folks exercise their precious right of democracy, not throw up every imaginable barrier to turn them away. Now this is the comment that Charlie made in reference to the long lines voters had in the 2008 election. What he did, he signed an executive order declaring a state of emergency, extending voter hours, and opening the polls on Saturday and Sunday. Now, in his book, there is an interesting conversation between him and this woman, Anna Navarro. In fact, this is the only place I could find where Charlie really got mad and wrote about it. What he said, she had told him, if you sign this order, you're going to give the election to Barack Obama. And his response was, someday, if you ever happen to be governor, you can be the person who says, I'm going to suppress the people's right to vote, the rights of the citizens of the state that I work for. You can be that person. I'm not going to be that person. And this next slide is the slide that ended. This is the slide that ended Charlie Crist's political career as a Republican. This was in Fort Myers when the newly elected Barack Obama came to Florida to talk about the stimulus program. In the Republican Party, it is an unforgivable sin to show respect for the President of the United States if it happens to be Barack Obama. And he was done. Okay, so that's from the book. At this point, I hope you see who Charlie is. He loves politics and has his entire life. He isn't the smartest guy. He isn't the richest guy. He isn't much of a partisan. But he is principled. He demonstrates a degree of humility unusual for a governor. Charlie said he learned how to focus on complex issues and see core principles buried in there, and that's what seems to matter to Charlie Crist, core principles. And he's a good guy, I think. Now, what he wants to do. Next slide. Okay, first thing, remove big utility companies' monopoly and let smaller companies who specialize in renewable energy compete by making it easier and cheaper for you to put solar on your home or business, as well as encouraging investment in solar and wind. And I would really like to see my electric meter spin backwards. The next one. With Washington, he'll work with Washington to make high-speed rail and mass transit a reality. He'll help put people off our clogged roads and will make it easier for Floridians and visitors to get around the state. Now, this was a done deal. This was going to happen until Rick Scott stopped it. Now, maybe Charlie can get it back. I certainly hope he can. It's certainly worth the effort. Within his first 2 years as governor, Charlie will fully restore funding for Florida Forever, placing an emphasis on securing land critical to preserving access to clean drinking water. Now, this isn't a purely partisan thing, because Jeb Bush and Charlie Crist both spend heavily as Republican governors to protect Florida's environment. Now, Rick Scott will tell you he has, but PolitiFact called his claim false. In reality, Rick Scott has gutted Florida's environmental protections. But Rick Scott's a Republican, so let's face it, he will put profits over people and drinking water whenever possible, and that's what he's done. As governor, he will never support near-shore drilling for oil off the coasts of Florida. Without our beaches, Florida's tourism market will dry up. Now, Rick Scott is very much in line with Sarah Palin on this issue. They are both drill, baby, drill. Next slide. As governor, more than 4 million Floridians lack basic health insurance, leading to nearly $3 billion in unreimbursed care. Charlie's plan would allow Florida to access roughly $50 billion from the federal government and to create affordable health insurance plan for working Florida families. Now, this would make health insurance cheaper for everyone in the state, and it would add 71,000 jobs. And so it's an economic issue, it's a humanitarian issue. And I've got confidence that he'll work hard to do something. Charlie will be voting for the amendment that will permit the use of medical marijuana in Florida. He believes that this is an issue of compassion. Now, I don't know where you stand on the issue of medical marijuana. There isn't a controversy about the benefits to people who are sick, and I've got firsthand knowledge on that in my own family. 82% of the Floridians support medical marijuana. Rick Scott said he would vote against it. Okay, finally, the next governor, one more. The next governor of Florida could appoint up to 4 members of the Florida State Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's decision affects all Floridians. Charlie, in his platform, says he will appoint justices who are fair-minded, fully qualified with no ideological litmus test. Well, the Koch brothers have now discovered that if they load the courts, they get their way too. So they're pouring money into court races and into the races for people that appoint judges to the court. And I just got to ask you, what kind of judges do you think Rick Scott would appoint? Not very good. So we're now down to the point where this is what I want you to do. If anyone asks you who you are going to vote for, I want you to tell them Charlie Crist. Then I want you to tell them that Charlie has a history of putting the needs of people ahead of politics, and tell them that you believe Charlie Crist is a decent, honest man. And then I want you to tell them that Rick Scott made his millions by cheating Medicare and bribing doctors to send their patients to his hospitals. Tell them his company pled guilty, paid a $1.8 billion fine, and fired Rick Scott. Then I don't want you to argue with your Republican friends and neighbors. They watch Fox. Facts don't matter. And they may be wonderful people in every other aspect of their life, but if they're Fox-watching Republicans, I don't recommend that you get in a fight with them, because no one is going to win. Just suggest to them that they go to Google, they write in Rick Scott, they go to Wikipedia, and down at the bottom of Wikipedia are all the reference articles that you can click on. Ask them to go and read and do some research. And after they research Rick Scott, if they want to go vote for him, well, there's nothing you can do about it. But you can vote by mail, and you can talk to all your Democratic and independent friends and get them to vote by mail and make the turnout for the mid-year the biggest in the club's history. And that's what we need to do, because you have to remember the goal. We have a goal, and that's the goal. Thank you.
Does he do his research or what? You remember all of those Charlie Crist quotes that he came up with. There was one that I differ with a little bit. It was, everyone deserves a second chance. In most instances, I agree with that, but Rick Scott doesn't deserve a second chance.